Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. Today's webinar will cover a post-quantum cryptography update presented by wolfSSL Senior Software Developer Anthony Hu. My name's Kristen, and I will be moderating the webinar. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box. After the presentation, Anthony will answer any questions. As always, all of our webinars are recorded and made available on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to stay updated with all the latest from wolfSSL, follow us on Twitter, connect with us on LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to reach out to us via email at facts@wolfssl.com if you have any further questions. Before we dive into the technical presentation, I'd like to provide a brief overview of wolfSSL. Today, wolfSSL secures over 2.5 billion connections. We have more than 2,500 OEM customers and dozens of resellers. wolfSSL consists of over 50 dedicated employees, primarily engineers. The progress is, of course, supported by a strong partner network that we are proud of. Since the beginning, our engineering team has developed several embedded security products, including wolfCrypt with DO-178 support, a FIPS 140-3 certification, and a FIPS Ready offering, MQTT up to the V5 specification, SSH v2, TPM 2.0, a secure bootloader known as wolfboot, Java wrappers and JSSE support, and commercial support for curl. And our newest product offering is wolfHSM. These offerings are accompanied by thorough maintenance and support plans up to the 24/7 level. We also offer full service consulting. Now I would like to turn it over to Anthony to discuss post-quantum cryptography update.
Hi, my name is Anthony Hu. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit before I start. So I've been with wolfSSL for approximately 3 years now, probably closer to 3.5. I've been a software developer for over 20 years now, I think. Wow, gosh, it's hard to say that out loud. I've been doing post-quantum cryptography for approximately 6 or 7 years now. So this is what you're looking at right now is our session agenda. We're going to be looking at, the standards community and what's been going on there. Then we're going to look at what wolfSSL has been doing with post-quantum, both in the past and in the currently, sorry. Then I want to get into benchmarking really quickly, but before we can do that, we have to explain the difference between a NIKE and a KEM. And, I don't want to get into those acronyms now. We'll go into that in detail, but that affects how you calculate your benchmarks. Then we'll get into our readiness and migration efforts with regards to post-quantum cryptography. And then we're going to talk about what others are doing together with wolfSSL. When I say others, I mean other open source projects and other organizations. And finally, we'll just talk briefly, just a single slide on barriers to migration. Okay, so let's start off by talking about, the difference between conventional algorithms and post-quantum cryptography algorithms. The conventional algorithms are basically the ones that we know and love and use today. They're not currently vulnerable to quantum computers, but they will be. In the presence of a sufficiently powerful quantum computer, given the public key, which is public, so you're going to be given the public key, you will be able, with a quantum computer, you will be able to derive the private key. For symmetric keys, the secret key can be brute forced, and the brute force time is reduced by half in the presence of a quantum computer. Examples of these conventional algorithms should be very familiar to you. They're ECC, RSA, Diffie-Hellman, and AES on the symmetric side. So with post-quantum cryptography algorithms, usually we're talking about public key algorithms. So when I say public key, I'm talking about key exchange as well as authentication. For these particular algorithms, there's no known attacks, even in the presence of a quantum computer. Generally, these newer algorithms use hashes or very new math, new or exotic math, such as lattice-based cryptography or a body of mathematics called isogenies. Examples of these algorithms include ML-KEM, ML-DSA, SLH-DSA, LMS, and XMSS. These might not be as familiar, but that's okay because they're basically what we're going to be talking about today. So, what are the immediate concerns that we have with regards to these, regards to cryptography and quantum computing? Well, there's two things. There's harvest now, decrypt later, and a deploy and forget mindset. So with harvest now, decrypt later, you've got malicious actors out there today storing, like basically vacuuming up and storing all the ciphertext on the internet. Maybe not all of it, but with some metadata, they can figure out what is the most important ciphertext out there, and they save it in that form as ciphertext. And once quantum computers are available, they will then decrypt all that ciphertext later. In the deploy and forget threat model, we're looking at devices that are, out there in the field and sometimes in remote or, inhospitable locations, such as maybe oil rigs or space, or they're or undersea or on boats in places that just once they're deployed, you just really don't have shall we say, a desire to go and update them with new firmware or new software. And so because you have this disincentive to update them, you might just keep old algorithms, these what we'll call the conventional algorithms today. They'll still be there on those devices, and you'll be using bad cryptography at that point. So what are the mitigations, and how are we going to do these migrations to post-quantum cryptography? Well, it seems that a lot of people are really talking about hybrid approaches. So with hybrid signature schemes, an example would be ECDSA hybridized with ML-DSA via dual algorithm certificates and TLS 1.3 extensions. We'll get into what that all means in another slide later on. We'll also talk about using hybrid key establishments. So that's, for example, ECDHE, which is elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, and that last E stands for ephemeral, and then hybridizing that with ML-KEM. And ML-KEM stands for Module Lattice Key Encapsulation Mechanism. We're going to use larger symmetric key sizes. And when I say larger, I don't mean that we're going to increase them. We're going to use what we already use, but noting that they're pretty large by today's within today's norms. So for example, if we're using AES, we'll use AES 256, which is actually already required by many standards organizations. A bonus of these hybrid approaches is that you'll be able to stay FIPS 140-3 compliant. We're very proud of our work with FIPS 140-3. Our NIST certificate 4718 sunsets it sunsets in 5 years in 2029. If you look at just about any other FIPS 140-3 certificate out there, they're only expiring in 2 years. So that we have something very special, and we're very proud to have this offering for our customers. Okay, so let's talk about some standards organizations and what they're doing about stateful hash-based signatures. So what is a stateful hash-based signature? Well, these are algorithms where each time the private key is used, that is after key generation, after each signing operation, the private key changes. You heard that right. The private key actually changes. The byte values of it changes. And so if you basically, what that means is after each signing operation, you have to ensure that you save the private key properly. You have to resave it. And if you don't, it's catastrophic. And what I mean by catastrophic is it means that all signatures that you've previously created, all of them must be revoked. And when I say revoked, I mean you have to advertise to anyone who's ever seen a signature generated by this private key. They must no longer trust any of those signatures. But the thing is that's really good about these algorithms is that they're very well studied and they're all very old. They're not vulnerable to quantum computers at all. And from a theoretical standpoint, they're very, very solid. They're very good, very solid, because all they use are hashes. And if all you use are hashes, and hashes are the most trustworthy constructs within cryptography, then this is a trustworthy algorithm. That said, that whole state pitfall is giving them a bit of is quite a problem. But the thing is that since these are old and well studied, this gives people a head start on their way to post-quantum algorithms. And we'll be talking a bit more about these later. We're also now going to talk about NIST and their PQC FIP standards that were just recently standardized only a few months ago. There's been a whole competition that laid out, levels of parameter sets that had equivalencies to AES and SHA-2 at different levels. But, these algorithms, they were specified, and then they had then parameter sets were created for them, and they had to, and during the competition, these parameter sets had to be proven to be equivalent to these various symmetric algorithm security levels. So the first one is FIPS 203. And it specifies, so FIPS 203 is the name of the document. It specifies ML-KEM, which is the name of the algorithm. And ML-KEM stands for Module Lattice Key Encapsulation Mechanism. It was based on the NIST Post-Quantum competition algorithm named Kristall's-Kyber. It defines 3 parameter sets, and as you can see on the previous slide, there were AES equivalents. So these are ML-KEM 512 is at level 1, ML-KEM 768 is at level 3, and ML-KEM 1024 is at level 256. And those are due to their AES equivalencies. These numbers on the table are sizes of the various artifacts. So the encapsulation key is 800 kilobytes. For the lowest level, these numbers are somewhat enlightening. Oh, by the way, those numbers in the parentheses are numbers that are the sizes for ECC at the equivalent security level. So for example, ML-KEM 512 is roughly equivalent to ECDHE on the ECDHE on the P256 curve. And for that, so for ECDHE, the public key is 64 bytes. The decapsulation, the private key is 32 bytes, and the public key is 64 bytes. That's why those numbers are in the parentheses. But you can see that these artifacts are far and away much larger than what we're used to in terms of ECC. So one thing you'll notice, one thing that most people think and most people assume is that performance is going to be a huge problem for these algorithms. And we'll see some benchmarking numbers that will dispel those fears. However, because you have these artifact sizes that are so much larger than the conventional algorithm artifact sizes, this is going to put a strain on your resources, right? So, we're looking at the encapsulation key and the ciphertext are the things that are going over the wire. If you're looking at a transmission medium that's, reminiscent of 1990s 14.4 kbaud modems, you're definitely going to feel some of the this is definitely going to have an impact on the end user, right? When you're looking at ML-KEM-1024 having first like approximately like 1,568 bytes going over the wire and then 1,568 bytes going back over the wire. That's a lot of data just for TLS handshake key, or just for handshake key establishment. Okay, so the next document we're going to be talking about is FIPS 204, and that specifies ML-DSA, which stands for Module Lattice Digital Signature Algorithm. And this is based on Crystal's dilithium, which was the algorithm name in the NIST PQC competition. It again defines three parameter sets and has three AES equivalents. The name of these parameter sets are ML-DSA 44, ML-DSA 65, and ML-DSA 87. Once again, very large, what is it called? Artifact sizes, sorry, very large artifact sizes. We're talking kilobytes, right? So if you go into the stronger one, the signature is almost 5 kilobytes. So if you can imagine what a certificate looks like these days, now imagine just reams and reams of hexadecimal values scrolling through your scrolling across your screen. So yeah, once again, artifact sizes are larger than ECDSA and RSA, and performance is not bad. It's not better than ECDSA, but it is on par. And again, we'll see what we mean by this when we talk about our benchmarks later. So FIPS 205 is the next document, and it specifies SLHDSA. It's based on, and this algorithm is a stateless hash-based signature scheme. So much like the ones that we were talking about earlier, the stateful ones, this one doesn't have the pitfall of the state. And so it's actually a really nice algorithm in the sense that it's the best of both worlds. It's strong in terms of having good, having the trustworthiness of hashes without the pitfall of the state. Now this is appropriate for, replacing LMS and XMSS, which were the stateful hash-based signature schemes. But interestingly, the CNSA 2.0 guidance, which we'll be talking about later, does not suggest using SLH-DSA. And we'll talk a bit about why in a future slide. Oh, here we are. We'll be talking about it fairly soon, actually. So we're going to be talking about what the NSA, the National Security Agency in America, they defined a document called the Commercial National Security Algorithm Suite 2.0. which everybody just calls the CNSA 2.0 guidance. And here it calls out crystals dilithium, crystals kyber, AES, and SHA. Interesting, it also calls out XMSS and LMS, those stateful hash-based signature schemes. Note they did not call out Sphinx Plus because these XMSS and LMS were already standardized at the time of that the CNSA 2.0 guidance was written. And so if they were to call out Sphinx Plus, it would almost be going backwards because everybody was already supposed to be working on XMSS and LMS by the time that Sphinx Plus would be standardized. Note that the names that we're talking about right now, Sphinx Plus, crystals dilithium, crystals kyber, are all older because this document was written back in September 2022, before NIST came up with the new names ML-DSA, ML-KEM, and SLH-DSA. And so remember what we were talking about, it was 2022, and they didn't call out SLH-DSA because you already had XMSS standardized. So what's going on? Why does that matter? Well, because by 2022, according to the CNSA 2.0 timeline, you are already supposed to have LMS and XMSS as an option. They are both excellent for software and firmware signing because these operations are offline operations. So it's a lot easier to guard the state when you're doing these operations. So by 2022, you were already supposed to be experimenting with them. By 2025, which by the way is only about 2 months away, it's supposed to be the default and preferred algorithm being used for software, firmware, and signing. That's in 2 months, right? So, you got to think about this. In your products, is it even an option, right? Let's talk about web browsers and web servers. This year, 2024, you were supposed to already have things like ML-DSA and ML-KEM in your protocols and implemented in your software, and added as an option and tested. By 2025, again, within 2 months of now, they're supposed to be the default and preferred algorithms moving forward. The same goes for traditional networking equipment. They've given an extra year for getting it as the default. So within 1 year, it's supposed to be the default for these devices. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I wish I could, take a quick visual survey of you, but I can't see any of you now. How many of you have these in your products as an option, as a prototype or as a test platform? I mean, if you don't even have it now, it's kind of, you should be kind of worried because, the NSA is expecting to buy this stuff relatively soon. Okay, so let's talk about what wolfSSL has been doing and what our current status is. This is just going to be a bunch of slides talking about our products and our current timelines. But before we get into the current products, I think it's really, really interesting and really important to state that all along, wolfSSL has been quantum safe. Ever since 2010, wolfSSL had NTRU already in its an entry implementation in its code. NTRU, which stands for nth degree truncated polynomial ring units, is a post-quantum algorithm, and we partnered with Security Innovation, which is a company in the United States, to bring experimental NTRU support to wolfSSL. Of course, it didn't win the NIST PQC competition, and it wasn't slated for standardization, so it has now been deprecated and removed from wolfSSL. Part of that work was also in 2015 adding support for QSH, which is the quantum safe hybrid handshake extension into TLS 1.2. This was specified by a draft at the IETF, a draft standard at the IETF, which expired and which also has been deprecated and removed from wolfSSL now. Okay, so I am not going to go into every line on this slide here because it's a lot of details, but it should give you an idea of all the work that we've been doing over the years here at wolfSSL with regards to, bringing in post-quantum algorithms. So wolfSSL and wolfcrypt are our flagship product. It contains all the cryptographic algorithms and implementations, and has TLS and DTLS protocol implementations. The most important point here is that as of wolfSSL version 5.7.2 on July 8th, 2024, which is, a few months ago, we had our own implementations of XMSS, LMS, ML-KEM, and ML-DSA, all 4 of those algorithms. Our product wolfSSH is an SSH v2 protocol implementation. What we did right away was add hybrid ECDH P256 with Kyber level 1. And we just sort of did that on our own. But then we, looked around at the community, and we talked, through our work with the NCCOE, which we'll talk about a little bit later, we were in conversations with AWS Crypto, with the AWS Crypto team, and we decided to do an interoperability project with the AWS Transfer Family product. So Panos K of AWS Security is the technical lead of the feature over there in AWS, and we had a lot of conversations with him. So, oh, by the way, we'll be talking a lot about this in another slide, and we'll even give you links to a slide where AWS tells you about how to do these interop tests. Now with wolfMQTT, it's a MQTT version 5 publish and subscribe protocol implementation. Here we didn't actually need to do very much because we were leveraging what happens is with MQTT version 5, it rides on top of TLS 1.3. And so all the post-quantum work that we did in wolfSSL, we got to leverage into by calling from wolfMQTT. And we've actually done Mosquito MQTT broker interop testing, not with the official Mosquito, but with a Mosquito broker that has been integrated with the Open Quantum Safe project. wolfboot, interesting enough, is a fully featured low-level bootloader for firmware on embedded systems. And we brought in LMS and XMSS into this particular product, which is really interesting because that's what was the earliest thing on the CNSA 2.0 guidance, right? Software signing and verification. So verification from a bootloader, obviously. And so we are ready for that upcoming deadline that the CNSA 2.0 specifies. Curl is one of our most famous products. It's a command line tool and library that is a non-interactive client for multiple protocols. Mostly what people use it for in terms of protocols is HTTPS, which again rides on top of TLS 1.3. So we've got, both hybrid KEM as well as regular KEM. And now you can even use dilithium certificates with it. And when we brought in dilithium certificates, ML-DSA certificates, and when we did that was literally no work because it just works. So I want to really want to get into our benchmarking. But before we can get into benchmarking, we have to look at how we can calculate those numbers. And so we need to talk about NIKEs versus KEMs. So NIKEs A NIKE stands for Non-Interactive Key Exchange. Examples include Diffie-Hellman and elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. A KEM stands for Key Encapsulation Mechanisms. Examples include RSA and ML-KEM. So, these are the APIs for a NIKE and then the protocol. So it's very simple. You do key gen on both sides, and then each side sends over their public key, and using the other side's public key and their own private key, they can derive the same shared secret. So the protocol is very simple. The client does a key gen, the server does a key gen, both send over their public key, both do derive, and then both have a shared secret. A KEM is a little bit different. One side does key gen, then sends over the public key. Then there's an encapsulate operation, which that the input is the peer's public key, and the output is the ciphertext along with the shared secret. And then the decapsulate operation operates on the private key and the ciphertext from the peer, as well as the shared secret, and the output, sorry, is the shared secret. So the protocol makes this very, very clear. The client does a key gen and sends over its public key. The server then does an encapsulate operation, and it has, at that point, it has the shared secret, and it has a ciphertext. The server ciphertext is sent over to the client, and the client does the decapsulation operation. It can do this because it now has the ciphertext, and it always did have the private key. After the decapsulate operation, it now has the shared secret, and both sides now have the shared secret. So why is this important? Well, you might have noticed that in the NIKE example, keygen and derived were each called twice, once on each side. In a KEM, keygen, encapsulate, and decapsulate are each called only once, keygen being called by the client, encapsulate being called by the server, and decapsulate being called by the client. So when comparing benchmarks for NIKEs and KEMs, you have to double the time for the operation of NIKEs for a fair comparison. Okay, so let's do that. We've doubled the time here. There it is. And you'll notice far and away the performance is exactly the opposite of what everybody expected. The performance is amazing. ECDH with P256 is like probably 10 times the speed of it's basically the same on all the security levels. We're looking at a 10 times speed up compared to ECDH when we look at ML-KEM. And so it's important to note that what you're looking at is average operation time in milliseconds. So smaller is better. Okay, so we're looking at great performance, and we don't really need to worry about performance moving forward when it comes to ML-KEM. Even if I didn't double it, it would still be really nice. But this just goes to show that you do need to double it just to make a fair comparison. For ECDSA, we don't have better performance. However, it's not bad. It's still within an order of magnitude when compared with ECDSA. So we're doing quite well, and it's not a catastrophic performance problem. It's just sort of on par, you might say. Okay, so let's look at wolfSSL's readiness and migration efforts. So when I talk about readiness and migration, basically we're talking about hybrids. And what are the different organizations, standards organizations, thinking on hybrids? When you talk to the NSA, they're willing to, they're basically saying we don't need hybrids, but if you're going to need to comply with other standards organizations that do require hybrids, then fine. We're not going to object to that. But they're saying don't use hybrids to appease us because we don't need them. So what's NIST stance on on hybrid key establishment? And they're happy about it. They like it. And what they're basically saying is even in a FIPS 140-3 module, if you use a hybrid key exchange properly, so if you're using FIPS 140-3 certified ECC implementation and hybridizing it with ML-KEM via concatenation, you're still operating in a valid FIPS 140-3 mode. Similarly, the same thing goes with authentication. If you're using dual signatures and you're operating in a FIPS 140-3 certified mode, you're still FIPS 140-3 compliant in a hybrid setting. What's our stance? Our stance is we love them. We support them all everywhere. In both TLS 1.3 and DTLS 1.3, we support hybrid key exchange at the following hybrid key exchanges. I'm not going to read them out. You can read them yourself. With dilithium, it's a little bit more. Dilithium in ECC is a little bit more interesting. With these ones, you have to consider that there's not just the connection time, but there's also work to be done at the PKI, right? So it's not just flipping a switch and everything gets supported all at once. What's going on here is you need to kind of do the work at the PKI level and then start populating it out. But then also, while you're populating it out and migrating all these certificates, you can't just migrate these certificates and have no one understand what these algorithms and hybrids mean. So what's ended up happening is there's a special migration path, and we're supporting this special migration path via these 2000 via these special hybrid certificates, which are specified in the 2019 edition of the X.509 standard. This is really important because for the 2019 edition, most people think of X509 as being the RFC 5280, but that was written like way before, like a decade earlier from now, like a decade ago. And we're looking at a 2019 change. So if you want to understand what these certificates look like, the official specification was added in the 2019 edition of X509. The X9 organization, which is a banking standards body, is looking into TLS 1.3 extensions for dual algorithm verification. So dual algorithm authentication. And so we're participating and prototyping that stuff. In SSH, again, we were talking about the ECC P256 Kyber level 1 key exchange, which we interop with with the AWS transfer family. Most notably on this page is DTLS 1.3. As far as we know, we are the only implementation, not just of post-quantum DTLS 1.3, but DTLS 1.3 in general. The only other DTLS implementations out there that we can find are only DTLS 1.2. So I'd love it if in the comments someone could tell me I'm wrong and point me to another DTLS 1.3 implementation. We're looking because we need to do interop testing. So what are others doing together with wolfSSL? And before we get into others, what are we doing with open source project integrations? Well, everybody loves a great web server demo. And if you know me, Anthony Hu, I've done a few other webinars, and in each case, we always do a web server along with curl. So we've integrated, post-quantum TLS 1.3 with Apache, Nginx, and Lydie, and we've made the demo available at these various links. So all these are README files, and you can read instructions on how to get these done. They're also the instructions are also part of various webinars that I've done in the past. A nice, really interesting, a lot of people come to us and say, well, post-quantum, geez, we're not even on TLS yet. We're still doing, plain text over the wire. And, to those people, it might seem really, really insurmountable to get all the way from plain text to, post-quantum algorithms. But you can do it in one foul swoop using secure tunneling. So we've got, for people who are, way behind the times, we've got a nice S-tunnel demo where you can, you can run plain text applications, use a secure tunnel to do a secure tunnel over TLS 1.3 using S-tunnel, our integration into S-tunnel, and have post-quantum algorithms in one foul swoop, right? So there's no like step-by-step moving to TLS 1.2, then moving to TLS 1.3, then moving to whatever. It's just one step into S-tunnel. Okay, so earlier I talked about how we had kind of talked with AWS crypto team through the NCCOE. Well, the NCCOE is a NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence program. They have a migration to post-quantum cryptography, shall we call it a program or a group? And, there are many companies within this group, a lot of big names, one of which was AWS. And we did a demo with them. We've also done various demos with other people, and we're going to be talking about those demos in these next couple of slides. So this is one example of another group that we met through NCCOE. Crypto4A is a company up in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. They make an HSM, like a rack mount HSM, not like the automotive HSMs that we are talking about when we're talking about wolfSSL. These are the kind of HSMs that have tamper detection. They're rack mounted. Usually you put them in a server room behind locked doors and access controls. So this particular demo was us creating a firmware image, right? And then, giving a copy of the firmware image, which was just a simple hello world printout firmware image, and giving them the binary of that to Crypto4A, and having Crypto4A do a key gen for LMS, and then exposing the firmware image to the HSM, and letting the HSM then give us the firmware signature as well as the LMS public key. This would then be, with scripts, be embedded into the wolfboot bootloader image, and then the firmware image and wolfboot bootloader image would then be burned onto a microcontroller and booted up. And wolfboot would use the LMS public key and the firmware signature to verify the firmware image. So, this is exactly what CNSA 2.0 is looking for. And we had this I believe we had this as a running demo, not this year, but last year's ICMC conference. Again, I've mentioned this many a time. AWS Crypto and wolfSSL's interoperability demo for SFTP using the hybrid ECC and Kyber over transfer family. Our kind friends at AWS have written this this blog post, and it outlines instructions on how to use wolfSSH client, how to build and execute wolfSSH client to communicate with the transfer family server in AWS's infrastructure. Please do go over and have a look. I think it's really interesting. I can't say enough kind words for the work that Amazon has done for us. Sorry, not for us, with us, in cooperation with us. So another one of our best customers in terms of, talking about using wolfSSL and letting the world understand that they don't roll their own crypto. They use wolfSSL to kind of implement the underlying cryptographic protocols and cryptographic implementations. And, they're one of the earliest adopters of post-quantum algorithms in their lightweight protocol, which is a protocol that rides on top of the TLS 1.3 protocol. They've already been using, Kyber in their protocols. So when you use ExpressVPN, it's already protected by these post-quantum algorithms. So finally, we get to our final slide, which is about barriers to migration. And when I say barriers to migration, obviously I mean migration to post-quantum algorithms. One of them is it's not an immediate fire that you need to put out. So, there's a lack of prioritization, right? It's not like anyone's breathing down your neck saying, when am I going to get my post-quantum algorithms? So, it's something that, should be designed and needs to be thoughtfully thought about and understood. But unfortunately, there is inertia and a lack of prioritization. There's a lack of awareness, which I hope, this talk and the others that we've done and the ones that we will be doing in the future and the other projects that we'll be doing in the future, hopefully that lack of awareness will go away through that work. Historically, there's been a lack of standards, but that's going away because obviously we do now have standards. Historically, there's been a lack of requirements, but now the US federal government has put out White House memos and various memorandums that have basically kicked off the schedule, right? You now have a timeline as to when the US federal government is expecting you to sell to them these technologies. There's also a lack of clear enforcement. For example, I keep on talking about the CNSA 2.0 guidance, but like I say, it's guidance. And I don't actually know how it's going to be enforced and who's going to be, who's going to be holding the stick telling you that you have to do this. And I think the number one most important barrier to migration is faulty reasoning about quantum computers. So a lot of people like to ask, even today, even experts in the field, they still ask the question in presentations like this: when will quantum computers break cryptography? And they pose this question, and then they try and answer it, and the answer is no one really knows. But it's an irrelevant question. The question is not when quantum computers will break cryptography. The question is, when do you need to comply with your upcoming requirements? Where are your requirements coming from? Are they coming from the government? Are they coming from your customers? And, when a quantum computer actually breaks cryptography, hopefully you'll have had all of this stuff in place long before that, because you've been complying with the requirements that you needed to. All right. Thank you very much. That's that brings us to the end of my presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, did you have something else to say?
No, I was gonna just say, Kristen, I was wondering if there were any questions.
Okay. Yes. Thanks, Anthony. Yes, we do have a couple questions. First one, to what extent is your Kyber implementation dependent on liboqs?
That's a great question. Um, Up till about 3 months ago, it was completely dependent on liboqs. However, today it has zero dependence on liboqs. So what that means is we completely implement Kyber as well as ML-KEM in-house. So if you wanted to go back and use good old Kyber that won the uh, competition, we have an implementation of that. However, we also have an implementation of ML-KEM, and you can use that. And you will not, and when you use those, you will not need to link against liboqs. Thank you very much for that question.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question. CNSA 2.0 is created by the NSA, but doesn't the NSA forbid hybrids?
No, and that's another great point. There's this misconception that the NSA forbids hybrids. The reason why they don't need hybrids is because they hybridize in a different way. They use a layered approach. So they use, or a nested approach, you might say. They have a TLS 1.3 connection within another TLS 1.3 connection. So the key exchange within the inner one might be using Kyber or ML-KEM for the key exchange, while the outer one might be using ML-DSA, or sorry, ECDHE for the key exchange. So this nesting allows them to do their hybridization. Now, what they have stated specifically is that they know they are not the only organization to put out requirements. And if there are other organizations that their suppliers need to comply with, then they are willing to tolerate, you might say, they're willing to tolerate hybrids within their within the products that they use. Thank you for that question. It's a really good one.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Anthony. We've got a couple more questions, but this one seems to sort of be a follow-on to that. Is our ML-KEM and ML-DSA fully standardized yet?
That's a tricky one. It depends on, and the answer is sort of. So if you look at it, yes, NIST has standardized ML-KEM and ML-DSA. They're both standardized. You can get their documents right away. However, if you want to use them in protocols, it's a bit of a different story, right? If you want to use them in TLS, you're probably not going to get them in TLS 1.2. You're probably not going to get them in DTLS 1.2 either. You're going to get them in DTLS 1.3 and sorry, both DTLS and TLS 1.3. But how's that going to happen? Well, they need to standardize code points. So there's work being done and it's underway today where the code points for these are being defined. Once those code points are defined and those code points are standardized, then yeah, they're basically fully standardized for GTLS and TLS 1.3. Now, the same thing needs to happen again for SSH, for IKE v2, sorry, for IKE v3, and for other protocols that are going on the internet. So we're keeping a close eye on these standards organizations and what's going on. And I think, and basically as soon as these code points come out, we're going to be supporting them right away. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Anthony. I think we have time for one more question. And thank you, Anthony. I know this is late your time, everyone. It's It was a 10 p.m. webinar for Anthony, so thank you. It was really informative. But one last question, and I hear this one a lot. Didn't quite understand the harvest now, decrypt later thread. Can you go over that a little bit more in detail?
Yeah, okay. As Kristen mentioned, I started at 10, it's 11 p.m. here. That's because I'm in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. And why I mention that right now is because I'm in Ontario. And I think when it comes to harvest and decrypt, it's a concept that it's kind of difficult to grasp until you have a real kind of concrete example. And so I'm going to give a concrete example that I'm somewhat familiar with because I live in Ontario, Canada. Over here, medical records must be kept and protected and then destroyed within 10 years, in 10 years. So for 10 years, a medical record must be stored and protected. And then after that 10 years, it must be destroyed, a medical record. So what does that really mean? It means that when a medical record is transmitted today, let's suppose today, my x-rays, images of my x-rays get transmitted over the internet, and someone is nobody on the internet can see it because it's all ciphertext, because it's being transmitted using TLS 1.3. But let's say some malicious actor decides that they want to know what my x-rays look like, and they through some metadata they figure out that this particular TLS connection is sending over my x-ray encrypted. So they store that particular transmission, the ciphertext of that transmission, along with the handshake and everything, and they store it today. And let's suppose that within 5 years, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer becomes a reality within 5 years. Now, that's a little optimistic, but it's well within what some people are predicting. So in 5 years, this malicious actor can now unlock my X-ray image, because the quantum computer could see the public keys that were going over the wire within the TLS 1.3 handshake negotiation. They then use those public keys to derive the private key. They can then figure that out to get the shared secret, and then they can then use that shared secret to figure out what the AES key was, and then they can then use that AES key to decrypt the entire transmission. And so what now happens is, within the lifetime, that 10-year lifetime of that data, my personal data has been violated. And so you might be thinking, well, that's just x-rays, who cares, right? Well, financial data holds certain, similar rules. And so if your financial data within a certain amount of time is being recorded today, and within a certain amount of time the data is being decrypted before your credit card expires, well, then you're in deep trouble. Government secrets, from what I understand in the US government, must be kept secret for 25 years, must be protected for 25 years. If you don't think we're going to have a quantum computer within 25 years, I mean, that's a rather extreme bet when you look at what the experts are saying these days. So it's an interesting, that basically kind of, these examples should kind of let you understand how harvest and decrypts really are affecting us today. It's a threat today that we need to address. Thanks for that awesome question.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anthony. And I guess we're out of time. So I just want to thank you, Anthony, for hosting this really super informative webinar. And thanks for everyone else for joining. We'll email a copy of the webinar recording and PDF slides. You can keep up with our upcoming events, meet our team in person, read our blog posts, and get to the latest updates from wolfSSL by following us on X, connecting with us on LinkedIn, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to shoot us an email at facts@wolfSSL.com. We're here to help. And thanks again. We look forward to seeing you soon. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, Anthony. Good night.
Good night.